Sure. At Divine Child. My favorite story about Angela is that she was at Mass with her little kiddos, and they came up to her after, and a little girl said, Angela, have you ever seen Elf? Do you know who Buddy the Elf is? And she's like, yes. And this little girl told her that Angela reminded her of Buddy the Elf because Buddy is so in love with Santa, and Angela is just like that, only she's so in love with Jesus. So Angela is here to share her testimony tonight, and she's going to tell us how she encountered Christ and found joy through her suffering.
So she's not at all nervous, so let's just welcome her one more time.
Wow, thanks, guys. So yeah, my name's Angela, and I've been here at ID 916 for the past couple months and joined up with the women's group. And as far as my Catholic faith, I was raised Catholic, so I grew up going to church, but mostly I grew up a soccer player. So soccer was my identity, and soccer was my everything. Few memories I do have of my faith growing up would be just going to church on Sunday, learning some basic prayers, and then being just super excited to be done with confirmation because it meant no more catechism. So that was all that Jesus meant to me. So I had dreamed of playing Big Ten soccer, and as I was preparing for college, Jesus was just totally far from my mind. He really didn't mean anything to me. I played at Schoolcraft my freshman year, and I just focused on getting better at soccer and getting soccer players to like me. So my whole life at that point had been spent just really trying to get others to accept me. One of my struggles was just compromising things that I knew were right in order to earn the approval and the love of other people. So I just really struggled a lot, especially with guys in relationships, and just trying to find value in that. So I ended up getting an invited walk-on to Michigan, but without God at the center of my life, I was falling apart on the inside. I was happy because I had soccer, but I was miserable because I was living this life of compromises, and I was never really being authentic to the person who I knew I was. So I started playing soccer at Michigan and basically was wearing Michigan soccer everything all the time. I was in like Angela Maile heaven from that perspective. Except, once again, my life was just focused on getting the soccer players to like me and the Big Ten lifestyle, so that was parties and practice. And so everything I did was, how can I get this person to like me? What can I change so that this person likes me? How will I feel better about myself by the way that other people treat me? So after a year, I ended up injured and I couldn't play anymore. And I was completely devastated. Without soccer and my identity that soccer contained, I felt like I was nothing. And so when I found out, I actually ended up back at a church, really had no idea why, but I was just threw every single emotion out at the Lord. I just gave him everything that I was dealing with. And he gave me a real sense of peace that night. And he was calling me to himself as I look back now, but at the time, I just didn't listen. I didn't care, and I went back to just kind of drifting through life. So my junior year, I continued that quest for approval, that quest to earn people's love. So I just kept trying to figure out what I could do so that other people would like me. Senior year, my parents decided that I was living at a Catholic house on campus. It was the Ave Maria house. It doesn't exist anymore. And I entered deciding that I was going to rebel. Like, I wanted nothing to do with a set of rules that I thought being Catholic meant. So before I moved in, there was a priest who came, and he gave a talk and was hearing confession. And I hadn't been in 7 years, and the girls just really encouraged me to go. So after I went, I just really felt like the Lord was telling me that I needed to ask this priest for help. I needed to talk to someone who knew Jesus as a friend. So I asked him to meet with me, and he said he would. And that night I went home, and my penance was to pray with the Mary Magdalene passage after she meets Jesus at his resurrection. And so he asked her, "Why are you weeping?" So I had no idea how to pray. I hadn't prayed. I had no clue, but I just told the Lord everything about why I was weeping. At the time, I didn't even have a Bible to look the passage up in, so I just threw it out there to the Lord. When I finally met with this priest, I remember sitting in his office, and I said, Father, without soccer, I have nothing to be passionate about. And he just gave me this grin, And he turned and he pointed at the crucifix. And he said, that is what you have to be passionate about. And it just struck me like, huh, that's kind of cool. I like it. So it started me just going back to Mass on Sundays. And eventually I started going back to daily Mass. When I was going back to daily Mass, though, it was still more of a obligation. Like, I could feel the Lord working in my life, but I was still just really holding on to all these identities in the world and these identities in what other people said. I let other people define me, basically. So one night before I went out in college, the priest had said, just ask the Lord, show you the college scene for what it really is. Ask him to help you to see what you're doing through his eyes. And I was just like, all right, fine, I'll try it, I guess. So I knelt down and went out, and nothing really happened. And I was going back up to my room that night, and we used to have the stations like up along the wall. And so I just looked up at them, and I really distinctly heard the Lord just say to me, there's so much more than that. And I just knew at that point that what I was doing with my life was making me miserable, that I had to run to the one who was calling me to himself instead of spending all my time running away from him. And so I ended up graduating and working for an IT staffing company. And I was still just struggling with this identity. And Father said to me, like, when are you finally going to just admit to people that you love the Lord? And I was still too scared. And when I finally did, I still had a hard time because people, they treated me a little bit different. But for the first time, I didn't really care because I had no longer let what people were thinking define me. It was my identity with the Lord that was finally defining who I was, and I was free. The first time in my life, I felt free to be who I knew I should have been all those years. So I started to ask the Lord how I could live my life more for him. I left this corner office job and worked for a small parish, and at the time I was seriously dating somebody. I was still kind of restless, so I went back to school for a master's in teaching, and in the meantime, this relationship ended. So when that happened, I was just totally lost. Without this person in my life, it shook my world to the point where I fell back into thinking, I'm not worth loving. I had known the Lord more, certainly, but I never had really believed that I was his daughter. So this priest, once again, just wouldn't let me take my eyes off the Lord. He kept my eyes focused on him and told me to have the Blessed Mother take me to her son. And so depending on Christ in this way just deepened my friendship with him that really healed the hurt that was left from that relationship. Through perseverance and prayer, I became closer to Jesus, and I just continued to ask him every day, Lord, convict me of my identity as your daughter. Help me to know who I am. Help me to know who you made me to be. And so I was healing, he was working, but I still had this control. I was like, all right, I love the Lord, but what if he calls me to be a nun? Sorry, sisters. Sorry. I love the Lord, but what if I have to give this up? I love the Lord, but what if this, what if that? So I was making sure I still had control of certain choices. So I went to teach at a Catholic school, and in my second year, I started getting really weak in my left side, and I ended up in the hospital for 5 days. When I entered, the peace I had was beyond anything this world could ever give. It was really awesome. I had learned about uniting my pain to the cross many years ago, and I was praying through people this whole time, every test, every uncertainty. And the Lord gave me this awesome image when I first got in, and it was him, and he had his arms just wrapped around this group of people that I had been given to pray for. And it was the most beautiful thing. And I just knew that everything I was going through had purpose, and I knew whose arms I was in. So the MRI ended up revealing some spots, and they sent me home thinking at the time that I had MS. So I went home and started getting even more sick. So U of M finally diagnosed me with a brain tumor, and I ended up needing surgery for that. It wasn't cancer, but it ended up being a really long recovery. So I realized that I had a choice. I could either run away from the cross that the Lord was allowing, or I could embrace it. And I knew that if I ran away, I wasn't running away from rules. I was running away from a person. I was running away from the one who had become my best friend. And I was running away from a friendship. And I knew I had to run to the only one who could really get me through everything. So I depended on him. I prayed when I could. I was able to receive communion at home every day. and then I went back to work. And that was actually the start of how the Lord really began to teach me about what a joy suffering can be. Over the past year, I've just started getting a lot more sick, and the most recent MRI showed that I have another brain tumor. And so if I look back, I would say I used to be afraid in my life of the what ifs in my relationship with the Lord. And this really struck me in the sense of I was afraid of, Lord, I can't do what you're asking me to do. Like, this is too much for me. And so I turned to Mary with that fear and said, all right, Blessed Mother, like, help me out. You said yes to everything. Help me to say yes to what the Father's asking of me. And I really learned that it's so true, this saying, your grace is enough, because the Lord carries me in ways beyond what I ever could on my own. My strength is from time before him in the Blessed Sacrament and daily Mass. And every single day, I wake up, I kiss the crucifix, and I just unite my pain to other people, for other people. And it's really incredible. It really is a joy. Excuse me. So, St. Therese, my buddy, used to say, she's like, we're tight. She used to have this saying, and she said, is there greater joy than to suffer for love? And I used to be like, yeah, to not suffer and love. Duh, right? But I've really found, honestly, that there's nothing more true than responding yes to that. Responding to the cross with a yes is greater joy than any game-winning goal, any joy than any guy, just better than anything I've ever experienced in my life. So I just trust that I unite this pain to the cross, and he uses it to bring souls to himself. And then recently someone told me something, and this really it transformed even more deeply my relationship with God. And it's really simple, it's really true, and it helped me to just totally let myself be in his arms. And I was just telling him about how I was struggling with being sick. And he looked at me and he said, you know, God knows you best. He's never, ever going to let you down. And I was afraid for a really long time of really giving my heart to the Lord, because I had just been let down too many times by too many people in my life before to trust the Lord. But that simple statement, it just helped me know the Lord. And so I can now pray, Lord, your will be done. I don't always get it, but I trust everything you have in store. But I certainly don't know at this point what the future of my health holds. But I know whose hands I'm in. I know he's with me. I know he's got me on this adventure. I'm hand in hand with him, and this whole thing is just centered on his love for me. And I know that it's an adventure that's going to lead me, please God, to one day become a saint. And I hope that my life and what he does within my life will always point souls to his heart. I know and I've learned that his love is never going to give up on me, even in my life when I feel like giving up on myself. He's brought me really incredible people in my life, and those people have taught me to cling to the cross with my whole heart. And it's just been amazing. So I've just really learned to give my whole heart to the Lord. And so one saying is by Father Rupe. Some of you may know it. I'll end there. And I think it just does a great job of talking about how when you really know the Lord, and it's not just knowing about him, that everything changes. And it goes like this. Nothing is more practical than finding God, than falling in love in a quite absolute final way. What you're in love with, what seizes your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the morning, what you will do with your evenings, how you will spend your weekends, what you read, whom you know, what breaks your heart, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. Thank you.